name is David Bluss, and I'm with Group 22 in Dr. Lauren Schweber's class, and this is my B1500 final project. So what we decided to do was we were going to manipulate the Detroit Police Department crime data, and this did crime from December 6, 2016, all the way up to present, which we pulled this data about a month ago. So it's from 2016 to about November of 2018. And so some of the data we manipulated were day of the week, hour of the day, year, precinct number, and time of the day, kind of just for some examples. And so once you start the function hit play, the function will load the file, which is shows all the crime data, and it will separate it into three matrices: num, text, and raw. Which before we were just using XLS read equals a variable, and we have problems where it will not input text; it would only input the numbers. And so then we found this where it'll input three matrices, where one of them will only show numbers, one will show text, and the other one will show raw, which is basically looking at it as if you're looking at it in Excel. Once it initializes all those matrices, it initializes these variables for the for loop, which will separate the data since most of our functions rely on crime per year. This will separate the data for 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. The data said 2016 to present, but as we did more research or looking into it, we found that there was some 2015 data and there was enough data in there where we could manipulate it. So we decided to have a little more data where the user has a little more options to choose. And so once it initializes it for 2015, it creates its own variable year 2015, which shows the direct position in the num matrix where the 2015 is, and so on. And so to run the function, we create a while loop, and we had it where a is less than or equal to 0. And so we initialize a equals 0. And since there's no a mentioned in the rest of the while loop, then the function will run until the end, which we have it where the menu will display exit, and that is case 7, in which will display a equals 1, and then it'll display program complete, which you will see that later on. And so for our first case is once we run it and initialize all the variables, the function will display a menu, and it'll ask the user what they would like to see. So, for example, we got numbers of crimes by year, or types of crimes by year, number of crimes by month, crimes by day of week, comparison from time to court district, and then time of the day. So, for example, if they wanted to see number of crimes by year, you select that, and then it'll run it through case 1, which will put it into an if-else statement, which it will display if the user entered 2015, then it'll have x equal to 1, which will run it here for 2015. So it'll take the crime data and count it for 2015. So it'll say how many crimes happened in 2015 and get a total. And then it'll create the two variables x, y, which will be for calling the user-defined function crime per day or crime per year, which is right here. And this will take the imported data from the main script and put it into a table. And so if the user were to select 2017, the output would be in the command window, which would be a 1x2 table, which will show the year and then the number of crimes. So it'd be 2017 is 82,673 crimes. And we had to initialize the variable names because otherwise it would be x equal to 2017 and y equal to 82,673, etc. And so we had to define the names as year and the number of crimes. So the user that was using this knew what type of data, so they weren't just like, what year is 82,000 and there's 2017 crimes. So another function that we got is types of crimes by year. So what it does is once the user inputs that, it asks the user for a year choice. So for example, if we were to choose 2017, it'll run it into the main script, and it will manipulate the data for 2015 as selected, and it will, once it manipulates that, it'll call the function type by year, which will use that function and initialize the types of crime. And so assault would be one of them, burglary, larceny, stolen property. And it'll run it through switch case, which is a for loop with if-else statements in it, which will help count the total number of arsons, sexual assault, and it'll take it and total all of them, so you know how many there are for 2015, and it would have 5 different cases for 2018 and all years, for example. And once it does all that, it ends the function and brings it back into the main script for the same function as, or for the same year it was selected. So if the user selected 2015, it'll come back here and display the pie chart with the given data, which will run the function pie chart, which will take the inputted data and run it through a if-else statement, which will put it into its own different pie chart, and which you saw probably earlier, which is right here. So for 2017, which the user selected, it shows this percentage of the crime in 2017 were assaults, this percentage of the crimes in 2017 were larceny, and just for a couple examples, like this one is stolen vehicles. And so the next user-defined function that we could have is the number of crimes by month, which once the user selects that, it will display the average number of crimes per month for all the data. So on average, in January, there's 124 crimes for all the years. And once it displays all that, it will display the average number of all those months. So on average, it's 119 crimes a year or a month. And then it also display the table that was displayed down here that showed each month and the average number. And it will display a bar graph displaying the same data, showing the totals and how they relate to the month. And when it does this, and it will run the function number of crimes by month, which is right here, which when the user inputs the data from the main script, it takes this and puts it into a for loop, which is also separate if-else statements, which counts the total number and the average of each month. And then once it does that, it'll display the bar graph as you just saw. So the next function that the user can select is the number of crimes by day a week. So when the user selects this, they are prompted to select the day of the week, or select the year. So if the user were to select 2016, the code would run it and display a bar graph. But as we saw if they chose 2016, then it would run this if-else statement. So it'll be A equals num of year 2016 and 11, which will count, since 11 is the column of days of the week, it'll count the number of data points for 2016, and it will run the function day of the week, which is right here, and it will initialize the days of the week and count the total. So for each imported day, so for like x equals 1, that is 2016, and so on, or 2015, and then x equals 2 is 2016, and x equals 3 is 2017, and it will manipulate the data and count the total number for the imported values. And then once it does that, it will categorize the values for X, and then it will create a bar graph, which is right here. So for 2016, it shows this. For Sunday, there's approximately 580 crimes, and so on. And so the next function that they could have chosen was the comparison of number of crimes by the time of day in the court district. So when the user selects this, they are prompted to select a district they'd like to see. And so, for example, if they wanted to see District 4, they select District 4. And when the function runs this, case 5 right here, it will manipulate the data from up above, and it will run the data, and it will display the function. It'll display the function plot curve, which will take all the imported data from the main script and run it through a for loop and an if-else statement, which will separate the data and configure it for where it will display the. It will allow the user to select the time of day. So since it was inputted as a military time, you have to use a 24-hour clock. So 0 is midnight and 23 is 11 o'clock at night. So for example, if we want to see 4 o'clock, you have to enter 16th to 1600. And then the user will see, they'll show some statistics such as at hour 0, which is midnight, is the highest number of crimes. And at hour 5, which is 5 o'clock a.m., is the least amount of crimes. And then also display this 2D plot, which shows the curve fitting of the data, showing the number of crimes by the time of day for that district. All right. And then the last function they could choose is time of day, or total crime by day. So once the user selects that, the user is prompted to enter a day of the week, which once the user enters that in the main script, it will take the data and count the total number for that day that they're selected. So if Monday selected, it'll count only Mondays for the whole data set. And then it'll call the function day, which is right here, which will take the variables and it will run it through the script and count the total number. And once it does that, it will take the variable, and if Sunday was selected, it will display a graph just for Sunday. So, for example, if the user chose Sunday, then it'll display the graph right here, and this is only data for Sunday, which shows the total number throughout the whole data set of how many crimes happen on a Sunday. And then the last thing that the main function or the main script will do is we'll do an exit. So, like I said before, it'll initialize a equals 0 or a equals 1, which will make the while loop false. And so it will end the whole while loop, and then it'll display the function or it'll display the message program is complete. And that will be the end of the program until the user decides to hit play. Some of the things that we learned from this is how to manipulate data, such as at the beginning, we weren't really sure how we were going to separate it into year. And we learned that you can just use an if else statement to separate it for each year once you have a for loop that initializes what data and column you're pulling the data from. Like I said earlier, another thing that we learned was using the read function, which allows us to separate into 3 different matrices instead of just one, which is just a number. And that's about it. Thank you for listening. Again, my name is David Blust with Group 22 and Dr. Lauren's BE 1500 class. Thanks for listening.